What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Atheist Roundtable. I'm Oz. This is just Jeff.
How's it going?
How you feeling, man?
Feeling good, actually.
Feeling good? Feeling good?
Well rested.
Good.
I've food.
I've been ready for this all day. Been excited about this all day long. I've been looking forward to this one. So it is TART Live Debate Night. And the topic tonight is Atheism Rational. And we'll intro our competitors here in a second. But we do have a jam-packed weekend, Jeff, ahead of us. So tomorrow we have Kay Neves and Jenna Belk, and they're going to be talking tomorrow night. Then Sunday, Dave Warnock, him and I will be chopping it up as well Sunday night. And then Monday, Randolph and Gavin, we're going to have another TART Live Debate Night, and they're going to be talking about the 10 Commandments with kind of the backdrop being is God the moral monster that they had.
That's Old Testament. It doesn't count.
God damn. You're right. Why did I schedule it? No, it's going to be good. And then the debate of February so far, just Jeff, is you. You have a debate coming up. Tell us about that.
Rapidly approaching. I should probably get prepared.
What's the topic of your guys' debate?
It is the God of the Bible just? And that's going to be Michael the Elect debating me on is the God of the Bible just?
Just. So that should be pretty easy for you, right?
I mean, I don't try. I mean, the thing is, I like, last night I was listening to you. You were on the show with Matt Dillahunty and on Neil 604 show, and someone asked Matt about something, and the call screener was there, and they said that they don't try and take bad calls. They want the best calls. They want the people that are going to stump Matt to be on the show. In the same way, I do look for. I'll debate most anybody, so I hope that it is a very good debate. That hopefully he has a very good response and maybe a good argument for it, but. I mean, of course, I always think I have the right idea because that's how people are. So I guess we'll see, Well,
the atheists always win when it comes to just and morality and all that, right?
Yeah, I guess sometimes. But I also always I always want to seek to understand the other opponent's opinion to try and maybe figure a way that we can move them to a common place. So maybe we'll both learn something.
Right. Absolutely. And as we get started here, if this is your first time listening to a TART Live debate, we joke around up top, but we do play it down the middle. We play it fair. And I think the last two debates we've had, we've given to the theists for, just to go on record. So, Jeff, without further ado, let's bring on the contestant. What's up, everybody?
Not much. How are you?
Feeling good. So again, tonight's topic is atheism rational? And I'll just go kind of in order, I guess, from right to left here, what I see on the screen, and introduce and then let you guys plug and shill and do all that before we get started. So Godless Engineer, thanks for coming on to the Atheist Roundtable again. Tell us a little bit about you and where everybody can find you.
Hi, I'm the Godless Engineer. I normally am on my own channel, Godless Engineer. You can find me on pretty much any social media as Godless Engineer. Over there, I do response videos and informational videos about different subjects. So if you like that kind of thing, you can go and check me out. Recently I posted a video criticizing somebody prophesizing about how Trump will be in a second term. So that was interesting. So yeah, y'all go check me out if you haven't heard of me before, and I can't wait to get to the debate.
Awesome. Thank you. And TJump, how about you, sir?
Yeah, so on my channel, what I do, I train pet otters. They're very cuddly and cute, but they smell. They smell really, really bad. Like, otters are terrible. They're worse than like cows. They smell awful, but they're cute. And if you're on my YouTube channel, you don't have to smell them because you just got the camera. And so I'm a little jealous of you by that. But yeah, just go to my channel to see me train otters.
Ladies and gentlemen, we can end it right. No, I'm kidding. David Gonzalez, how about you?
Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time? I was trying to pull something up on my phone when you were asking the question.
No problem. Obviously, they have your name now, but where can they find you? Anything you got going on that they need to know about?
David Gonzalez. I need to do more things on my YouTube channel. I haven't posted a video in months, probably, but I hopefully planning on doing so. Thanks to Pasta Mike, he actually sent me a setup with a camera that I have where I can start making some more higher quality videos. But I'll be talking about stuff revolving around probably the Christian God, apologetics, if I decide to keep going with that. So I have some videos up right now on my channel, but I'm not being consistent right now. So
okay, fair enough. Well, then get your shit together, David. And then Matt, what do we need to know about you? Is there anywhere they can find you?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Can y'all see me? I cannot see anything from my end here. All I can see is just the frozen screen.
Nope, we see you.
Okay. Well, nothing really. I don't have a YouTube channel. I actually started debating atheists back about 7 years ago on Facebook in debate groups. And I've done a few debates, YouTube debates with the Empathetic Atheist Show, as well as one appearance on Modern Day Debates about 2 months ago. And that was the topic of slavery. So really, I don't really do there's no YouTube channel you can find me at. I just kind of am active in some of these social media sites debating atheists.
Okay, perfect. And we have one more person to bring to the screen here before we get things started. So we'll bring them on right now. Dr. Josh is in the house.
No pressure.
So real quick, Dr. Josh, thanks for helping us. Dr. Josh will be the referee for tonight, but where do they find you?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. We are, my wife and I are on Digital Hammurabi. That's our YouTube channel. We're on Twitter. I can't remember where else we are, but she handles all that stuff. But we do ancient Near Eastern stuff. And we have some books, one on slavery, one on Sumerian, a couple on Sumerian now, and putting a new book together now called Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament. So should be an interesting read, I hope.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it will be. And I'm sure it'll be another TART required reading, which we have here. So real quick, everybody, before we get into the debate, because the topic is atheism rational, I wanted to make sure that we had a clear definition, and then you guys can kind of start from this point. But the one and only Randolph Richardson put this video together for me, so it's kind of a neutral place to find it, but we'll do this and we'll get into it.
Hello, I'm Randolph Richardson. I'm the founder of the Canadian Atheists, a national organization that seeks to normalize atheism in Canadian society and throughout the world. The word atheism represents an all-encompassing and tremendously diverse classification demographic of individuals who share one specific trait, the absence of belief in any deities, which is the same as stating, I don't believe in any goddesses or gods. While some atheists are more outspoken than others, for example, some are also anti-theistic, which means they hold to belief, position that deities do not exist. These are individual traits that are incidental to atheism. Hence, there are no specific expectations to conform to any particular standards, behaviors, doctrines, or ideals. Today, the Atheist Roundtable is graciously hosting a debate on whether atheism is rational. Although atheism is not reliant on any justifications because it is the null hypothesis, since not believing is normal. I am looking forward to hearing today's great debaters delve into the rationality of certain optional justifications for atheism. Thank you for tuning in to TART.
Awesome. Thank you, Randolph. We'll get this thing started so everybody understands the format. It'll be 15-minute openings, 20-minute cross-examinations, 45-minute open discussion, and the 15 and 20 minutes will be per team. And that being said, I'll pull Jeff and I off here. You guys can get started, and then David and Matt, you guys can go first, and as soon as you guys begin to speak, I will. I'll hit.
Wait, who's going first?
I think we should, because we're the affirmative, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess so. We didn't really work this out beforehand. TJump, do you want to go first? You want me to?
Sure, I will jump in. That sounds good. So I am an atheist, by which I mean I believe there's no reason to believe in a God. I'm happy to defend either the strong or weak atheist position. I think both are more rational than theism. And essentially the justification goes like this. When in epistemology, we start with the cogito, I think, therefore I am. That is the first and most solid grounds of all knowledge. And then from there, you can say there's some difference between my imagination and my experience. If I imagine a unicorn, I don't see one. So there's got to be some difference between these two categories of things. And we have to find some way to differentiate which one any particular thing is. So if I say, I think a God exists, we put it through the same method. Well, is it one of the imaginary things like a unicorn, or is it one of the things that exist independent of our imaginations, like the TV or the earth or the sun? And until we can find a methodology to do this, the default position is to say it's probably imaginary, because most of the things we see around us are imaginary. We've come up with millions of ideas that clearly do not exist due to millions of fallacies, biases, delusions, illusions, hallucinations, and all kinds of things that our brains do, which are just false, that have been beneficial for survival. So it's like if we woke up on an island, if all of us here in the debate are all woke up tomorrow on an island, we're trying to figure out, well, how did we get here? What placed us here on this island? There's several possibilities. One is maybe a God put us here, a being kidnapped us overnight and put us here. That's a possibility, but we shouldn't believe that from the outset. That on the outside, we should believe is, well, we don't know, so we should look for evidence. And until we find evidence, it is best to withhold judgment. That is the most rational position to take. And until we can actually find evidence of any hypothesis, it is also rational to conclude that particular hypothesis is imaginary. So if I said we were brought here by an evil billionaire, Elon Musk probably, that it's reasonable to conclude that no, we were probably not brought here by Elon Musk. That's probably just something I made up in my head. So if you have any particular conception of a God or whatever who put us here, created this universe for us, the rational conception is either to withhold judgment and say, not until you provide evidence to differentiate that from being imaginary, or to reject that wholesale and say that's probably imaginary, like the millions of other hypotheses we've come up with, which are just purely imaginary. So again, in order to establish the rationality of a belief system like a God, you would need to provide some methodology that we can use to differentiate that hypothesis from being one of the imaginary things like the unicorn versus one of the real things like the stars, the planets, solar systems, particles, whatever. And until you do that, it is the most rational position to take is to say either I reject that hypothesis as being imaginary, or I lack belief in that hypothesis. Either of those are going to be more rational until such time as evidence is provided that your hypothesis is non-imaginary. Therefore, atheism is the rational position. And I will conclude there.
All right. So my turn. I guess I take a much simpler approach to my position, atheism. Basically, I don't see any good evidence whatsoever to support the conclusion that a God does exist. And how I come to this is I've examined all of the arguments and all of the evidence that suggests or supposedly suggests that a God exists. And they don't really seem to support that final conclusion. So until I find good evidence to support that final conclusion, I'm not gonna believe in this magical deity that supposedly exists. What kind of led me to actually investigate that was considering, how many different gods we've known about in the past. Those have all been proven to not exist. They are all man-made concoctions used to explain things that we don't understand. And so given that prior probability, most likely any definition that any person could come up with is most likely going to be wrong. And so that it's not really an argument against God like this ambiguous God figure that could possibly exist. On that particular note, I consider myself agnostic. I don't know if that God exists. I don't think that we'll ever know whether or not that God exists, because he could exist without us ever knowing about it. But as far as specific definitions of God, like are generally argued for in all of the arguments that are put forth, I would say that he definitely doesn't exist, and it's because of the fact that we have all of these other different gods that have been defined before that point. And unless we have good evidence to suggest that any particular definition of a God exists, then we probably shouldn't believe that a God exists, or at least that definition of a God exists. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I feel like that's a very logical, rational, and reasonable point of view of it. The fact that I'm not convinced by the current arguments for God, I feel like that in itself makes it reasonable to come to the conclusion that a God, or at least the current definitions of God, probably most likely don't exist. And that's where I'll leave it.
All right, Matt and David, you guys are next. I'll hit the stopwatch. You guys had plenty of time left. But whenever you guys, whoever's going first, when you start to speak, I'll hit the watch.
All right, Matt.
Matt, you're muted, buddy.
Still muted. All right, you're
There you
good.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I didn't realize. Like I said, I can't even see you guys at the moment, so I may end up having to leave and come back in a few minutes so I can actually see the camera. So I'm kind of just guessing what's going on. But everybody can hear me good now, right?
Yes,
Yep,
yes,
you're
we
good.
can.
Everybody was muted.
No, we were muted.
Okay. Is atheism rational? Is what we're debating here. First thing I want to do is kind of go over the definition of rational and the definition of atheism. Randolph had kind of given a definition there, but I don't think his definition is a real common definition that generally most atheists kind of apply to their own position. But the definition of rationalism, Oxford Learner's Dictionary defines rational as of behavior, ideas based on reason rather than emotions, of a person able to think clearly and make decisions based on reasons rather than emotions. So by that definition, would atheism be rational? Oxford Learner's Dictionary defines atheism as a lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. Quick Google search of the definition of atheism shows it defines it as a disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. Webster's Dictionary takes about 3 approaches. They go with the negative definition, the positive definition, as well as a philosophical definition. A lack of belief or a strong disbelief in the existence of a God or gods, or a philosophical or religious position characterized by disbelief in the existence of God or gods. The American Atheist Inc. Corporation or organization calls atheism, they say atheism is not a belief in God or a denial of gods. It is a lack of belief in gods. And most atheists I have discussed atheism with, will tell me if I make an argument saying, well, atheists have this position or atheists have that position, they will accuse me of straw manning atheists and insist that atheism is simply a lack of belief in God or gods. In fact, I have commonly been called out for straw manning atheism according to them. But does lack of belief require the possibility of belief? I mean, a goat grazing in a field or a roach running across a kitchen floor would lack belief as far as we know from a scientific perspective. I've even been told by atheists that we are born atheists until someone starts telling us lies or indoctrinating us. So that would imply atheism would require no rationalism whatsoever to be an atheist. A tribe that supposedly never heard of God, the concept of God, would also be considered atheists according to the weak negative definition of atheism. So again, no rationality would be required. So I don't think this is really a debate, because lack of belief in God or gods would require no reason to be rational. But that's considered the negative definition. What about the positive definition? The belief that God does not exist. Is that rational? I don't think so. I don't think it would be. If you don't believe there is an intelligence behind our existence, such as God, then how can you conclude anything is rational, or if rationality is even possible? Generally, most atheists believe we are products of evolution, but there is no evidence that rationality is even needed for survival and reproduction as a species. As Tom actually pointed out a while ago, that we actually believe things that aren't true, that aren't rational, as a survival mechanism. According to some studies put forth by folks like psychologist and Professor Don Hoffman, we may not even see reality as it really is. So how do atheists know they are being rational without an assumption? If you are a hard determinist, you can't control your own thoughts, according to that position. The ability to be rational is not even possible. It's just essentially an illusion or a trick of the brain. And Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, and lots of others have argued that we do not have a lot of control over our consciousness, or our consciousness is simply an illusion, tricks from the brain. So in conclusion, if an atheist is going to say atheism is rational, they will essentially have to take a giant leap of blind faith and toss these theories under the bus and take almost a supernatural stance to appeal to rationalism, because rationalism would imply the ability to think freely. But if you were simply an evolved mound of flesh without a supernatural being having created you, that would be physically impossible, because you would simply be doing and not being rational. So ironically, by this position, simply from an evolutionary worldview without a creator, you would actually be making a supernatural claim as an atheist to even claim atheism is rational. Everything would have a purely material, naturalistic explanation, including consciousness, which is required to have freedom of thought to think rationally. But there would be no freedom of thought in a purely material, naturalistic existence. So to even claim to be rational as a positive atheist definition, atheism, would require a supernatural claim for an atheist to even make.
Is that a?
That's it. Yep, that's all I have.
All right. So for my opening statement, I'm going to start off by saying I know that this can possibly be a question that maybe I guess uncomfortable for some people, and I just want to make sure that my intention in this is not to try and be bombastic or passive aggressive or anything like that. For the sake of the conversation, I will kind of work from what people classify themselves as. But as someone who has thought about atheism as a definition for a long time, once I heard the lack belief definition, something just never ever sat right with me about it with terms of the lack belief definition. And it hasn't actually been until recently that I learned about the Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy. And I'm just going to read some paragraphs from this as part of my opening statement for some things. And I know that Tom and Godless Engineer, you guys have kind of laid out your definition. But I just want to point out that for me, this is kind of the definition that I've always kind of thought was the definition that I think should be. And I'll explain my reasons for why and how it relates to, is atheism rational? So I also encourage everyone, of course, to read this for yourself. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's actually a long entry, but this can be found in the Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy of Atheism. So it says atheism is typically defined in terms of theism. So in other words, atheism is kind of like something that says whatever you define yourself as, I'm not that. So the first principle for this to me kind of seems interesting, that atheism tends to define itself as an opposite chameleon to whatever theism decides to classify itself as. Theism, in turn, is best understood as a proposition, something that is either true or false. It is often defined as the belief that God exists. But here, belief means something believed. It refers to the propositional content of belief, not to the attitude or psychological state of believing. There's an apologist that I learned about a couple years ago named Frank Turek, who during some of his debates, he will talk about this when people use the lack belief definition and ask them first of all, how do you know you want to be convinced? Right? I think I'm at least justified in asking you why you're not convinced, because there's, the lack belief kind of implies that there's something that's missing. But he also said, I just lost my train of thought here, but he also said that he pointed to the same principle, the one kind of appealing to their psychological state. Basically the not convinced argument of lacking belief seems to kind of be synonymous with saying, well, I don't feel like what you're saying is true. And so if that's the case, again, going back to separating, logic from emotion, I think it's important to make that distinction and decide what the reasons are for why you're not convinced. Because if you're not convinced for some emotional reason, then that's not a rational reason to not believe. And then, of course, if not being convinced in and of itself is a psychological state that is synonymous with an emotional response, then, of course, that doesn't work as what it means to be rational either. And I would encourage people, if you take that definition, to just take the negative. We're all biased. Science shows it. We make decisions based on two things, that is both intellectual and emotional. And so if you're already leaning more towards the notion that God doesn't exist, I would say that a good show of token that people who take the lack belief definition could do is to just take the negative. You can always change your mind later, but at least then you can at least start setting criteria for what you call God, what would classify evidence for God, etc. That way you can start discovering whether or not you really disbelieve in God or if you do. And then it says, if, however, atheism is defined in the terms of theism, and theism is the proposition that God exists and not the psychological condition of believing that there is a God, then it follows that atheism is not the absence of the psychological condition of believing that God exists. The A in atheism must be understood as negation instead of absence, as not instead of without. Therefore, in philosophy, at least, atheism should be construed as the proposition that God does not exist, or more broadly, the proposition that there are no gods. I'll leave it there, but I'm fine. I want to say with this, I understand that no one should be forced to take a position, at least right off the bat. As someone who used to be more involved with politics, I consider myself conservative. I understand the importance of kind of reserving judgment. But you are, I would say, is still in a sense saying that you kind of disbelieve in whatever both conclusions are, on any political issue, but you still want to wait. The best evidence comes out, I think, like within 72 hours of something happening. So that's when you can start making inferences and making, a good time to make judgment calls. Matt kind of already hit on the definitions of reason and rationality. So I was actually going to go over those. He kind of already did that. So that works. And the only thing I have left is I just want to read a couple of things. There is a man by the name of Pascal Boyer who wrote an excerpt on disbelief, basically stating that if you are someone who takes a disbelief position, that it is actually requires more cognitive work to maintain and support a disbelief position in the existence of God. And then a supporting case that I have of neurological studies that talked about this too. This is from it's ResearchGate. It's called "Atheists Become Emotionally Aroused When Daring God to Do Terrible Things." I'm using this to challenge the statement that you're not convinced that God is real. This is very short. It says, we examine whether atheists exhibit evidence of emotional arousal when they dare God to cause harm to themselves and their inmates. In study 1, participants, 16 atheists and 13 religious individuals, read aloud 36 statements of 3 different types: a God statement, an offensive statement, and a neutral statement. In study 2, where n equals 19 atheists, 10 new stimulus statements were included in which atheists wished for negative events to occur. The atheists did not think the God statements were as unpleasant as the religious participants did in their verbal reports. However, the skin conductance level showed that asking God to do awful things was equally stressful to the atheists as it was to religious people, and that atheists were more affected by God statements than by wish or offensive statements. The results imply that atheists' attitudes towards God are ambivalent in that their explicit beliefs conflict with their effective response. And so what this study is basically kind of showing is that one may tell themselves that they're not convinced God is real, whatever the case may be, but this study seems to show that at least with some individuals, not with all, that there is a suppressed belief in God that there is probably an emotional attachment to for why an atheist rejects belief in God. Now, with that being said, I want to say something. I know I don't want to talk too much about what I personally believe, but as someone who is a Christian, I am someone who would agree with this in principle, in the sense of that I don't want someone to come to the wrong conclusion either. And especially with some people who have come out of the church and things like this, I can understand that there was probably something that took place in their past that may be related to the reasons why they either don't want to believe in God or reject belief in God subconsciously, but they just don't want to admit it. And also, last thing with that in mind, there was another study. Okay, 2 minutes left. I'm almost done. Good. There was another study too that showed that just as a cognitive default, they have done some studies, a lot of studies with children, showing that whether you grow up in an atheistic home or in a religious home, your brain naturally, when experiencing a religious experience, give signals of normal brain function. In other words, these things are not directly associated with what we would consider to be unnatural delusions. And so our brain essentially has been created or made, however you want to phrase that, with a cognitive default to accept a belief in God. And that these beliefs are not imaginary, at least according to what the brain scans show. And so obviously the antithesis of that, and I know that this is different for everyone. I'm not saying that all atheists are the same, but I would argue that for some people, it might be more natural. For others, it might not. But as a general principle, the evidence seems to suggest that our cognitive faculties as humans seems to be that we naturally accept a belief in God. And so, of course, I would say that in some sense, that if atheism is the antithesis of theism, then in some sense, you could make an argument that atheism, that conversation ends up, could be irrational, because it would be denying something that I would argue would be something that you would expect to see in a world in which a God created us with the intent of us discovering him. So
Oh, what's up, Jeff?
Going on.
All right, so round one, they get to get a drink of water, stretch, talk to the corner man,
take some
take a breath.
notes, prepare their
Right.
argument.
How you feel after round one?
I mean, we're getting somewhere. I think that I get, how I am with word games. And so the defining of atheists, it seems to be an argument, or at least something that comes up quite frequently. So, it is, I guess it's necessary. And I think Randolph's video was really good. I think he did a good job of kind of defining it, but I don't know. I kind of think like if the number one is I believe in God and the number -1 is I don't believe in God, I'm at a 0. That's kind of how I define atheism. I'm not positive number. I'm not a negative number. I'm 0. So if there's a better word that we should be using, maybe we should do that. But I think that it's theist, atheist, anti-theist is kind of how I see it. But it does seem to be a common occurrence in these types of debates that we end up spending a good amount of time defining the word atheist.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why even, again, thank you, Randolph, for doing that. We did the video up front, so that way that definition was, we try to keep it as clear and concise as possible. But at the end of the day, it's we just, we're not convinced. There's not enough evidence to warrant that belief.
And I guess, like when TJump and Godless was saying about it being the default position, I don't think that you have to be aware that you're an atheist for you to be an atheist. If a child is born, they don't know, they're not aware of a God, therefore they just default into that position. They're not making a claim either way. So, but I don't know. I'd like to see, I know that now we're going to see the retort from TJump and everybody else and see what they have to say. So I'll be interested to see what Godless and TJump have to say in response to the rather lengthy explanation that we got.
Yeah, absolutely. And usually that first round, the opening statements are, laying the groundwork for the arguments. So this is usually when it starts to get juicy. So let's bring it.
You all right, TJump? What's going on?
Taking my shoes off.
Oh, okay.
Getting comfy.
I love doing the Trump dance. I don't know if you all know
Yeah, that's right.
Trump does the double
That was-
fisting the big dicks.
That was a beautiful dance. I'm just glad I can see y'all now. The whole opening, I couldn't see you. I was just, it was just, I froze up, so I'm back in now. I can see everybody moving around.
Awesome. All right, so this is the cross-examine portion, right?
Is it? Are we
Yes.
starting? Can I start?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my first question though is it like could either David or Matt make a solid, like just a single solid argument why atheism is irrational? Because I really didn't hear anything in y'all's opening that stated why or how rather atheism is irrational.
Sure. Yeah. I just realized I didn't make my answer crystal clear, so that I can do that. Sorry about that. So my answer is kind of both yes and no. And again, because of the nature of the question, I mean, in some sense, I was actually honestly kind of expecting this to maybe even somewhat be a trick question, because some people even make the proclamation that atheism is not even a position, right? So when you ask the question like, is atheism rational? Well, I have to first define if you even think that atheism is even a position. So this debate is kind of a circumstantial topic because everyone defines atheism differently. So my answer is kind of both yes and no, and it depends, right? If you say, for example, that I don't believe in God because evil and suffering exist, well, that's not a rational reason to deny a belief in God. I don't like it don't necessarily constitute a rational response to the proposition that God is real. Or if you said, I'm not a Christian anymore because I had a bad experience in a church. And again, I want to treat these responses with humanity, because again, we only have two faculties. We have the emotional and the intellectual. And I think that what we tend to do as human beings is, if we fail in one area, if we're hurt in one area, we tend to kind of overcompensate by going to the other extreme. And so I think that
What's the answer? What's the answer? I'm like dragging on. What is the reason that atheism is irrational?
The answer is kind of yes. Okay. The answer is both yes and no, or no, depending on the person.
So I'll take the strong atheism position for this debate. So Godless will take the lack. I'll take the strong atheism. Tell me why my position or his position is irrational. Go.
Okay, you say that so I've watched some of your stuff, TJump. You said that you've seen I've seen your debate with Eric Hernandez, and he asked you at the end of one of your shows, why do you deny the Christian God? Your response was because of the problem of suffering. If that's your reason for why you deny the Christian God, that's not a reason to say God does not exist or say that Christianity is not true.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. I
Why?
take the logical problem of suffering. So a God who is all powerful and all good could not logically create this world, because there is a morally superior world that he could have created, that is very easy to create, that we humans could create, and he did not do so. Therefore, this is logically impossible for him to exist, because if an all good, all powerful being existed, he would necessarily have the power to achieve this world, because we can do it. Because if he can't do something we can do, then clearly he's not all powerful. And it's morally superior because we have models of objective morality that are clearly drowning babies is objectively immoral. God drowned babies. Therefore, God is not objectively moral. Therefore, there's a contradiction. Either he cannot be both all powerful and immoral. Therefore, it is logically impossible for such a God to exist. But again, you didn't actually give us a reason why atheism is irrational there. You just asked for one of my reasons.
Well, let me.
Appealing to emotion is an irrational response to the question of.
I didn't appeal to emotion, so that doesn't work. I didn't appeal to emotion. I appealed to objective morality.
Well, can we agree that the lack of belief in God, in the existence of God or gods, is could be a definition of atheism? Because that's what most atheists tell me is the definition.
Yeah, absolutely. That is.
Okay,
so hold on. That's what TJump meant by strong atheist. Like, there's different labels that can be used. Strong atheist or Gnostic atheist is the harder atheist position of no gods exist, right. While the agnostic atheist or soft atheist position is the non-belief in a god. So, I mean, just by the breaking down the word theism and atheism, theism meaning a belief that God exists, atheism meaning not a belief in a God or a non-belief in a God or a lack of belief in a God.
Okay, so by that definition, lack of belief in God, then would you say a baby is born an atheist?
I would say that's a misapplication of the label, but also the debate is not over the definition of atheism necessarily.
Well, what I'm getting at is if a baby is born an atheist, and this debate is about atheism being rational, then there would be no rationality required to be an atheist. And I think the debate would be over simply on the definition of lack of belief.
No, it really wouldn't be, because I would say that babies are born secular, meaning that they're just without concern of a God, right? We've got our government is secular. There's many things in this world that are secular, but that just means that they're just without regard to any kind of notion of a God. And that's what I would label most of the things that you guys would characterize as being atheist. I would say it's secular. Babies are secular. Cockroaches, they're secular. If you had to apply a label to them, so I wouldn't say that babies were atheists. I would call them secular.
I'd actually like to pick up on that as well. So even if babies are atheists, that's still rationality, because rationality is just based on or in accordance with logic or reasoning. It can be in accordance with logic and reason without you actually knowing it is. So to be rational, you don't actually need to know it's rational. So it would be perfectly rational for babies to be atheists, and it's perfectly rational to be determined, or you could be determined by physical forces and also be rational. There's no contradiction there. You got that wrong in your opening. So like if I was determined,
so if a baby requires
just one second.
Sorry.
If I'm determined by logic and reason to believe things, so if you give me a logical argument, I am determined to accept that. That is still rationality. So even if I'm determined, I can still be rational.
I don't see how you could be determined to be rational when rationality would require the ability to change your mind by using the rational thought process.
So if I'm determined by rationality and you give me a rational argument, then that will cause me to change my position because of the rationality.
But you would have been rational regardless, right? You were determined to do that.
Right. So you can be rational to believe one thing and then be provided better evidence, which can then cause you to rationally believe something else.
But then that would defeat the whole determinism argument.
No, that means I'm determined by the reason. So if I have a reason to believe X, and then you provide a better reason to believe Y, then I change my position to Y. That's all rationality. There's no irrationality there.
So let me ask you something. Maybe you can clarify determinism, but my understanding of determinism is a person is going to do certain things, and even if they were to go back in time, they would not and redo this. They would not have changed and acted differently. Is that
Yep.
kind of okay? Yep. So I don't see how in that mindset you could actually say, okay, well, someone presents an argument or I look at something using rational thought and I choose to change my mind to go another way because you were going to go that way regardless. So because you would simply be a product of your physical material makeup, making these decisions without any control.
What's the definition of rationality?
Hold on, and I will find it. Of a person able to think clearly and make decisions based on reasons rather than emotions.
So if you gave me a reason and I then chose to believe something based on that reason, even if I'm determined to do it, my choice is determined, that's still rationality, isn't it?
No, because you couldn't. I don't think you could choose if you were determined to do it. You would just be doing it.
Nope. In philosophy, choices are just fine without being determined. So you're presupposing your definition of choice, which is rejected by everyone in philosophy and the dictionary. So you don't actually need free choice to be able to.
Well, what about? I don't want to take. Go ahead. Let me just say one thing. What about the scientists and philosophers who say consciousness is just an illusion, or we don't have control over our own conscious thoughts? How would you respond?
Well, we don't have control.
Why don't we save your questions for your period?
Okay.
Cross-examination.
By the way, is this? I'm not sure. Was this a cross-examination for us or was this for y'all? I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, good clarification.
Yeah.
I mean, it started as
because I think
TJump. So
Okay, well, y'all just keep asking us questions. I didn't realize I was not supposed to ask y'all questions at the moment. So y'all can ask us a few during y'all's time to kind of make up for it.
Well, can we agree that somebody can think they're being rational while they're also being irrational from an absolute or objective standpoint? So, like, for instance, like I would consider you guys to be irrational for believing in God for whatever reason, whatever argument that you would present for believing in God. I would feel that reason is irrational, right? So, what I was asking at the very beginning of this is for you guys to point out a flaw in our logic to in coming to the conclusion that God probably doesn't exist, or in TJump's position, a harder atheist, that God doesn't exist. Where is the flaw in the logic or the reasoning behind either of our reasons for being an atheist? Like, do you have a specific argument against like us being an atheist that makes it irrational?
Well, that's why I kind of hit on in the dictionary that the definition that seems to be adopted is this definition that kind of appeals to one's psychological state of mind, which, as Matt was kind of saying, it's not really saying anything about reality. You're just saying, hey, I don't feel like what you're saying is true. But it's like if we're at a court case and you and I go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm not talking about the truth of reality. I'm talking like somebody being irrational is not about the truth of reality. Somebody being irrational about something is about whether or not their logic is flawed, or whether or not their reasons for believing in a certain thing are flawed. Right. So we're not talking about the objective or absolute truth of reality. We're just talking about somebody's specific reasons for believing something.
So what about our position is not in accordance with reason or logic?
Well,
okay, go ahead, Matt.
Well, I was going to say, if you just simply have a lack of belief in God, then even you don't even need to require any reason and logic for doing that. You could, as I said, if that's the negative definition, then my simple argument is there's no reason or logic required to be an atheist, simply based on that weak definition. Now, in Tom's case,
well, so I think that means you're admitting that definition is rational when you say that.
Yeah, I think saying lack of belief in the existence of God or gods, that definition would require no rationality. So yeah, in that case, that would be a rational statement.
Okay.
Well, no. So let's get something straight here. Atheism is just, is just saying no, I don't believe in a God, right? So I don't think that atheism itself can be rational or irrational. It's about how a person comes to that conclusion. So my question is that from both TJump and I, what about our reasoning is irrational? Because we're both coming at it from different perspectives. I'm more of an agnostic atheist. He's coming at it from more of a Gnostic atheist point of view. So is there any particular thing that is irrational or illogical about either of our reasons for not believing in a God?
I would say, in a sense, it would be a lack of a falsification criteria. I mean, TJump, I actually just recently watched a debate that you had with a philosopher who challenged you on this. You said that there are no good reasons to believe in God. So it sounds like you basically just said that you don't think that we can ever know if God exists. And if that's the case, then you're not taking an atheistic position. You're saying you don't think God can never be known.
No, straw man. I never said that. So my position is it's really easy to show God exists. If I pray for God and get a gold brick, that's evidence of a God. So I never said you can't know God exists at all. It's not a part of my position. But again, in what I presented in our opening statement, in this debate, What about either of our arguments is not in accordance with reason or logic? You failed to answer that question for the past
I did.
10
I
minutes.
said a lack of a falsification. If you're going to say that there is no reason to believe in God, first of all, you're talking about something. So I expect you to know what you are talking about, because it's like
the falsification criteria is give me a reason to believe in a God. That's the criteria. And so I literally, in my opening, I said, you need a method to differentiate imagination from reality. If you give me that method and it passes the test, that is a falsification of there's no reason, because then there is a reason. So what?
No, but I'm challenging your statement of what you are saying is rational or not. It is you not making something very clear about what would convince you that there is a God. Making broad statements like, well, I don't see evidence, I don't see reason.
I literally answered that. I literally answered that in the beginning. You need to provide a method to differentiate imagination from reality. I don't need to tell you what the method is. You need to tell me what the method is. Then I can evaluate the method to see if you're right or not. Any scientific method we already have, that would work fine. So testable predictions is great. That would work as a falsification. You still have not answered anything in our question. What in our logic is not in accordance with reason or logic? Like, yes, there is a falsification method. I literally gave it, just testable predictions work fine, or you can provide a different method. Either of those work. Tell me what in our reasoning is not in accordance with logic.
Were any of y'all theists or Christians before you became atheists?
Yes, but that doesn't have anything to do with our opening.
Okay, so that would not, atheism wouldn't be your default position then.
What does that have to do with our opening? What in that is not
because you didn't really explain in your opening why you were an atheist. In order for me to find out whether your reasons are logical, I would need to know your personal process in which you left your theism to become an atheist.
No, we gave you the reasons in the opening. We said there is no evidence. That is the reason. That is the reason that we are giving to support our atheism, not our personal reason.
Yeah, that's a very generic term.
All right.
But anyway,
it's
time.
Yeah, let's go ahead and swap. So Theus, you have what, 15 minutes? Is that where we're at?
We can maybe let them have like a question.
Yeah.
I think we accidentally.
Yeah, we cut into their time, so if they want to continue for like a few minutes, they can.
Sure.
No, I feel like it was.
Okay, Tom. Let me see if I can help, because maybe I'm not understanding what you're saying. So let me explain what I'm trying to say. So you're saying there is no good reason to believe in God. Okay, so you are making a statement of things that you are talking about within that statement. So you're talking about evidence.
Clarify.
Yes.
So there's that meme where Steven Crowder is on a desk and it says some provocative statement, prove me wrong.
Yeah, to change my mind. Yeah.
The point of my saying there is no reason or there is no evidence of a God is a strong positive claim, just to open the conversation so someone can then present one. I'm not literally making the ontological claim. There is literally no evidence, because obviously I don't literally know everything. It's simply a provocative claim in order to start a conversation. My actual argument was literally what I said in the opening. You need to provide a way to differentiate imagination from reality, and you haven't done so.
Okay, but we're talking about.
I don't think this is about us needing to do anything. The atheism is kind of on the fence here, not theism. So so I don't know where you're getting that we need to provide anything.
So the reason I am an atheist, as I presented in my debate, is because there is no evidence to indicate the existence of a God. Because in order for anything to be reasonable to believe, you need to show that it isn't imaginary. So if you don't have a way to show it's not imaginary, then it's reasonable to conclude it's imaginary. So until you provide evidence, I am rational to conclude the hypothesis of a God is imaginary and does not exist.
Well, philosophers and scientists have questioned if our reality and our perceptions are imaginary or not to begin with. Free will, for an example, we have the perception of free will, but they say free will does not exist. So how can you even trust your reality when you're dealing with God or as an atheist?
Because I start with, I think, therefore I am. So I exist.
How do you know you think? How do you know that you exist? How is it not your brain just playing tricks on you, as Daniel Dennett has suggested?
How could my brain be playing tricks on me if I don't exist to be playing tricks on? So Daniel Dennett does not say consciousness does not exist. So that's not how his position works.
Right.
So
hold on. Go ahead. I'll find his position.
Well, I was going to say, we're kind of going the solipsism route, which is a little bit different of a conversation. But regardless of that, we're we're presented with a reality, whether or not we're a brain in a vat or any of this is really happening. is really not helpful in a conversation, because we're still presented with the reality that we exist within. So if we can move past that point and get to the point of you guys making an argument for God and then telling us why we are irrational for not accepting that argument as proof that God exists. Maybe that can get us moving in a direction in this conversation, because we're just literally arguing about definitions and things that are just not showing us how we're irrational for not believing in a God.
Well, the only problem I would have with that is because when we come to this debate, y'all were already atheists beforehand. So I don't think we need to provide an argument as to why God exists for y'all to tell us why that's irrational. No, I don't.
No.
This
You're
is
right.
no. This is.
Matt, you're right. So you're right that you are not required to provide an argument for God, because the topic of the debate is atheism rational? And so when we are addressing is atheism rational, the reason it's rational, the reason it's in accordance with reason and logic, is because of a reason. And that reason is the fact that there is no evidence. If there is no evidence for an object existing, then it is rational and in accordance with reason to think it's imaginary or to lack belief in it. Therefore, atheism is rational. And so for atheism to be irrational, there would need to be a reason to believe in this thing. Does that make sense?
Well, and that kind of goes to my point of bringing up, make an argument for God, because, you need, I feel like you need to tell us why we're irrational for not believing in God. And the reason why we don't believe in God is because there's no supporting evidence to suggest that a God exists. So it kind of feels like it depends on the argument that you present to us as to whether or not we're being irrational. And I don't know, that's kind of how I see it. I feel like you guys need to provide evidence that this God exists, because atheism or being secular or just being irregardless of any kind of knowledge of God or any kind of concept of God is the null hypothesis. It's the default position. So, I feel like in order to convince somebody that a God does exist, you guys need to provide a piece of evidence that shows that God exists. And then you need to tell us how we're being irrational in rejecting that evidence as God existing.
So just use an analogy, is it rational to believe the world is not flat? Well, yes. Well, why? Because there's lots of evidence the world is round. So because there's lots of evidence the world is round, it is rational to conclude the world is not flat. So if there's lots of evidence to conclude a God exists, then it would be irrational to be an atheist. But if there's no evidence that there's a God exists, then it's rational to be an atheist.
Okay, yeah, and this is, I'm glad you used that, because this is kind of an analogy that I used. If someone is a flat earther, despite the evidence, and the response to the proposition that the earth is round is, I'm not convinced the earth is round, that's what I'm trying to hit at. When your default response is, I'm not convinced in X, again, all you're telling me is your psychological state. You're not examining the evidence itself necessarily. You're just saying, you're just like I was saying, you're just telling me what your psychological state is.
That's totally fine.
Reason in and of itself.
That's
We're
irrational.
We're literally asking you for the evidence, though.
Well, let me. I understand his point.
Hold on. Yeah, let them cross-examine. Then when we get to the open discussion, we can talk about it more broadly.
Yeah, so that was a question he was asking, so I wanted to respond to it. So yes, the flat earther is responding by giving you his psychological response that he is not convinced the earth is round, but that is irrational because there's a ton of evidence that should be convincing to a rational mind. So if there was no evidence that the world wasn't round, then that statement is perfectly rational. It's perfectly rational to say, I am not convinced the world is round, unless there is a large body of evidence there that says otherwise. So it doesn't matter if it's a psychological position or a positive position. Either one can still be rational if there's no evidence to support otherwise.
And so what I'm saying is that if you come across a person like that, and their response is to just always reject any evidence that you present, they just tell you, I'm not convinced, would you feel at least justified in saying, okay, what would convince you? Because at that point, what it seems like all that they're doing is just subtly shifting the burden of proof back onto you to keep saying more things that they know that they're just not going to accept anyways. would you say that you would at least be justified in saying what would convince you? In other words, would you please falsify your position for what would convince you that the Earth is round?
Yes,
What
yes.
piece of evidence would you accept as
Yes, that's
convincing?
perfectly rational. I literally answered that 10 minutes ago. Novel testable predictions, the exact same criteria used for anything in science, or you could provide any other method you would like that can differentiate between imagination and experience. And after we test that, and if it works, I'll accept that too. So my standard is literally the standard of science, or anything else you could provide that can work.
So just science. Just science.
I literally just said no, not just science. Science, or you can provide whatever method you want that can differentiate imagination from experience. And then I'll test that to see if it can.
So why does theism exist?
Type 1 and type 2 delusions.
What is the evolutionary from an evolutionary standpoint, what is the reason of atheism today? I mean, not atheism, theism.
Yeah, so type 1 and type 2 delusions. It's if you see a rustle in the bushes and you think it's just the wind and it happens to be a lion, well, then you get eaten by the lion and you die and you don't reproduce. But if you hear a rustle in the bushes and you think it's a lion, even if it's the wind and you run away, well, then you survive in all cases. Therefore, the people who think it's a lion, even when it's not, are going to survive more than the scientists who are going to remain agnostic until they provided evidence. So the scientists who sit there and say, I'm going to wait and see if it's a lion and test it and find out, they die real quick. And the people who think, it's a demon lion, we got to run away, all survive. And so all of humanity builds up this natural proclivity to believe there is agency behind things where there is no agency. And so we have a proclivity to believe in religion.
So it's a survival mechanism, so to speak, for us as a species, to better survive and better spread our genes and reproduce and everything.
Yes.
But it's that doesn't mean it's true according to you all, right?
Yes, just like if you believe there's a lion in the bushes, it could just be the wind.
If we could, just real quick, all right. So it's time. So I think we're in the open discussion now. So is that correct?
Okay.
Awesome.
Nope. I apologize, guys. I hit the wrong button. I got 5 minutes. That's my bad.
Okay.
I'm
sorry. Yep.
That was my mistake.
So in that case, then their reality, in their reality, God existed, and it was a survival mechanism for them to better survive. But yet it was a lie. So at this point, how can we even trust our reality if theism was a mechanism for us to better survive? Then how do we know atheism is not a mechanism to kill us off as a species, especially since 99% of all life has become extinct?
So how exactly would atheism kill off our species?
Well, I mean, if you let's say you started saying, well, there's from the moral argument, a lot of atheists believe that there's morality is subjective. Just say, okay, well, I'm just going to do. Now, I'm not saying that's what every atheist would do, but some people would do that, such as have made that argument. If God does not exist and anything is permissible, so we could lead down a path of who knows what and kill us off as a species. I mean,
So let me respond to that.
Well, actually, can I give a better example? Because I can actually give a good example of how atheism could kill us. So in the example I gave earlier, like if we think there's a rustle in the bushes and we're atheists and we don't believe it's an evil demon god, and we think there's no evil demon god, that's a stupid explanation, I'm not going to run away from an imaginary god, and it happens to be a lion, well, then we die. Whereas the people who thought it was an evil demon god run away and they survived. So it's possible that the belief in atheism and the lack of belief, a supernatural thing, could actually incidentally cause us to die. Or like if we believe there isn't a God and some magic voodoo guy said, the God says we must run away. And so all the religious people run away and we don't. And then there's a tsunami that kills us. There's lots of different possibilities like that. That's why type 1 and type 2 fallacies exist.
Okay. Would you like?
Okay. But I mean, I would say that it's not plausible for atheism to be the reason why. Like, while it may be possible, I don't think that it's plausible. But still, I guess I'm having trouble getting past this idea that atheism can cause our species. It plausibly cause our species to go extinct. Now you mentioned morality.
Yeah, that was just a possible conclusion.
Right. Well, So, do you agree that the morality of religious people have changed over the centuries?
Well, why not,
Well,
John? Why don't we let them
Yeah, we could discuss
cross-examine
that.
you
in
guys, and then we can
yeah.
talk about that
Yeah, I
later.
actually wanted to answer his question about how can we be rational while being atheists. So the argument you're bringing up is the EEAN, the evolutionary argument against naturalism, which is that if all of our beliefs are purely because of survival benefits, then how can we trust any of our beliefs are actually rational? And the answer is because survival benefits can't make all of our beliefs irrational. For example, survival benefits cannot make us imagine a round square. It's impossible. Survival benefits cannot make me feel I don't exist and be right. It's impossible for certain beliefs to be irrational, no matter how much survival benefit they may have, because it's literally impossible for nature to give us those beliefs. And based off of those, we can ground knowledge and build off of them to come to a conclusion. So like saying, I think, therefore I am, is one of those beliefs that nature, no matter how good survival is at giving us delusions, it can never cause us to believe we exist and be wrong. It's impossible. It can't do it no matter what. And from that, we can start to build off that. Like, there's a difference between my imagination and my experience. We need some way to differentiate between the two, like science. Science tells us X, Y, and Z. And from those, we can come to conclusions like there is no God. So it's perfectly rational. You can gain rationality perfectly well under a survival-based system, perfectly fine. No problem there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would disagree with you there, and I'll let y'all respond to this comment here. Daniel Dennett says, what we think of our consciousness is actually our brain pulling a number of tricks to conjure up the world as we experience it. But in reality, it's all smoke and mirrors and rapidly firing neurons. So how do y'all respond to philosopher Daniel Dennett in that comment there?
That's Daniel Dennett from his book, The New Epiphenomenalism. Dan Dennett thinks consciousness is epiphenomenal, which does not mean it doesn't exist. It means that it's a byproduct of the subconscious mind. So it's essentially your subconscious creates an image that you're seeing, and that subconscious then makes the decisions that you think you're making. And so your consciousness doesn't actually do anything. It's only a reaction to your subconscious, but it's still there. It still exists. So you're misunderstanding Dan Dennett's position.
Well, that doesn't sound very reliable, though. That sounds completely unreliable to me.
Like literally, whether or not our decisions are made by our conscious or our subconscious, the reliability.
Yeah, I mean, if it's smoke, if our thoughts and experiences are smoke and mirrors, tricks of our mind, then how can we trust anything?
If our decisions are made by our conscious or our subconscious, they are equally reliable either way. It makes no difference.
Right. Well, also, I would say that there's scientific evidence for this too, because there have been studies done on basic decision making where they've been able to detect a person's decision, nanoseconds before they consciously know that they've made the decision. So, I mean, what TJump is saying is in line with what the scientific evidence shows us.
Does that show that we don't have control? I'm sorry, time's up.
I think we just open it up into, what did they say, 45 minutes?
Just Jeff. What's next? Ben, Matt's on the screen. Bye, Matt. Oh, man. All right, Jeff, I'm going to give you first crack.
I'm trying to remain neutral, but obviously, I think TJump has explained the same thing 3 times very well. I want to steal that clip later to use for my own. But really just the observation I had. It's interesting to me that people, not necessarily Christians or theists or whatever, but it's interesting to find people that are typically not critical of their own position becoming hypercritical of someone else's position when that same criticism really should be applied evenly. To any argument, I would hope. And I do like TJump's explanation. It makes sense to me. I think obviously he's very well researched on the subject. So yeah, I think that I can't wait to get to the open dialogue. I'm really stoked to get to the open dialogue.
Yeah, after the cross-examination, my thing is I'm still trying to hear why atheism is not rational.
Right. Yeah. We keep getting we keep getting off of that subject and getting lost in the weeds of other things, or TJump having to defend certain things, or Godless having to discern certain things. I hope that I would like to know what makes atheism irrational.
Right. And as a very I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm just a very common
No.
sense thinker, and I know you know that. So I think most of the world knows that. For me, it's okay. Atheism. Here's the definition. Why is that irrational? That's all I'm waiting to hear.
Right.
So I think it's easy to play it down the middle on this one. If you ask me, it's one of the easier ones to do.
Yeah.
So, but before we bring them back on real quick, we've had some super chats, and
Yes.
During normal episodes, we call them as they come on. But obviously, in a debate format, it's a little harder to do that. But towards the beginning, Eddie Kroom, TJump already won. He brought the one hitter quitter, the chair. Pastor Mike is in the house with the King Noodle. I don't know what that means.
Oh, you know what it means.
James is tired. Thank you for $2. TJump just demonstrated atheism is not rational. We'll have to go back and see the time segment on that.
I was watching.
That was at 10 o'clock.
It was the second time he was explaining the reasoning for giving a method in which to determine the imaginary from the reality.
Oh, okay. And then Yuhan, not believing something, in parentheses, insert literally anything here, exists until evidence verifies is pretty objectively rational. Skeptic mafia for life. I agree. So thank you guys for the super chats. And we're getting ready now to go to the 45-minute open dialogue. This is when it's going to get fun. Oh, don't break anything.
I was going to do one of these, but I guess I won't. That kind of hurt, actually. I think I cut myself.
This is when it gets fun. And just so everybody knows, this is when I'll start putting more comments up on the screen as we go through it, so that the chat room's engaged. Yes, Jeff.
And we got Q&A after that. So if you got questions, hold them. Get ready, because we will call for a time for questions and answers. So write them down or whatever, and hold them so we can keep them in order. We want to get you guys. So don't drop it early. Hold on.
Yeah.
And super chat is obviously an easy way for us to find it later.
Yeah, when there's about 20 minutes left, I'll pop it up on screen. That's about the time you can start putting the questions in. And I'll tell you right now, with as many people as we have, Murder Shed Steve, the murderous one, will be here to take the questions, and really the best way to do it is to super chat, because he can save those for for when it's time to come back around to that, and make sure that.
Oh shit!
Oh man,
that means he's entered the building, guys.
That means he's here. But then that way we make sure it sticks to the top. We can ask your questions. So Jeff, let's do it to it. 45 minutes. 45 minutes. Let's get.
Yeah. Tom,
All right.
Let me I'm not trying to be difficult, and maybe I'm just not understanding what you're saying. So I'm trying to answer your question. I really am. Maybe I'm not understanding. So let me try again. If I don't get it this time, I'm just going to say that I'm just probably not understanding what you're saying, and we'll just move on. Okay. Can you please, one more time, can you please stay? Okay. So let me say this first. Okay. So I'm not saying one way or another as a starting point that atheism is or isn't irrational. I think it's dependent on the individual and what their reasons are. But a lack of a reason is not a reason. It is exactly that, a lack of a reason. If you simply just say, I don't know, or I'm not convinced, I don't know what I'm supposed to pull from that to say, to be like, okay, well, this is evidence that might convince you. And for me, as far as I'm concerned, with what I've noticed in my experience with a lot of atheists, is that when they usually say they're not convinced, they don't seem to have any interest. And what they seem to just be doing is sitting back, crossing their arms, and then just waiting for me to say something so that they can just say, nope, not convinced. And if that's the case, then I'm not going to bother, because if you're not even going to tell me what you think God is or what would constitute evidence for God, I'm just not going to waste my time trying to convince someone who, in my opinion, doesn't seem to be interested in wanting to know if there is a God or not.
Yeah, and to put it simply, if you lack belief in the existence of God due to lack of evidence, then what evidence do you lack in order that you would believe?
Two different questions there. First off, is just saying I am not convinced could be perfectly rational. So rationality is whether or not a belief or whatever your position is in accordance with reason or logic. So there is this objective, like reason and logic over here, and there's your beliefs over here. And if these two line up, it's rational. So if someone says, I am not convinced by the evidence, and the evidence is objectively not convincing, they're right. So it doesn't matter. Like whether they're delusional makes what?
Whether you're persuaded that the evidence is true or not is not an objective statement. Like we were just talking about flat earthers.
Two different things.
Talking about flat earthers.
Whether the evidence itself is objectively should be convincing to a rational mind is independent of whether or not someone is convinced.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see what you're saying.
So if someone is not convinced and the evidence does not objectively meet the rational criterion of being convincing, they're rational.
Who gets to decide?
This one doesn't matter. This person makes no difference whatsoever. Like what I personally believe, what GE personally believes makes no difference. What matters is do our beliefs correspond to this thing over here? The objective fact of the matter. Is there some reason or logic that objectively should be compelling to a rational mind? And if there is, then this person is irrational. If not, they're rational.
Right. And so I guess that's what I'm trying to get. That's what I'm trying to extract from trying to ask for what would convince you. Because when you just say a lack of evidence, I don't know what that means. Evidence could be a lot of things. And when you just simply say a lack of evidence, and then you say, well, a rational mind wouldn't reject rational evidence. Well, who gets to first of all decide what rational evidence is?
Every criterion of evidence we've ever used in science ever, just anything we've ever used or anything you can introduce that works. This is literally, there's no limits here. Anything that you can use that can differentiate imagination from reality is evidence. Do it. I don't care anything.
Right. So empirical evidence would be a really good start for evidence that God exists. But okay, so let's just take my position in particular and the reasons why I am an atheist. Okay, let's just go with one of the reasons. That reason being, we have all of these other definitions of gods in the past that establishes a prior probability of any future any future definition of a god, which would include the Judeo-Christian God or just any Abrahamic definition of a god. The probability that God is the correct version of God is pretty low because of the prior probability that's already been established. Now, when you add on to the fact that like nothing in the Bible corresponds to reality, there's the Bible is not history and it misrepresents history in reality. When you add all those things onto it, you have to have really good, solid evidence to overcome all of that evidence, right, against the fact that Christianity represents the one true God. Now, so this is an argument against a specific definition of God, obviously, but considering that you both of you guys are Christians, I would think that this is a really good first step in showing how we're irrational. So using that reason right there, the fact that the prior probability of any man-made definition of God being the true definition of God, and there not being compelling empirical evidence that can overcome that prior probability, what makes that irrational?
Well, I would first of all say that. Oh, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say a few things here. The laws of logic, orderly nature of the external world, the reliability of cognitive faculties in knowing the world, the importance of inductive reasoning.
Could you slow down a little bit? Matt, say those a little slower so I can type them out.
Yeah, the laws of logic, the orderly nature of the external world, reliability of cognitive faculties in knowing the world, the importance of inductive reasoning, and objective moral values, all that are used in science and are important to science. And William Lane Craig pointed out that in the second half of the 20th century, philosophers of science first started realizing that this cannot even be demonstrated by science, but are actually assumptions that science starts out with that are guaranteed by the Christian worldview that can be backed up by Scripture. So in my case, I think it's a whole lot more rational to be a Christian, to be a theist, than to be an atheist, because I don't think atheism can guarantee any of that.
So your argument is that science can't answer these questions. Your God hypothesis can, therefore your God hypothesis is more reasonable. Is that?
No, my argument is science takes the assumptions that these exist at the beginning without even demonstrating it in order to conduct science and in order to do everything we know. We assume these things exist at the start. Our first thought process is an assumption that these things exist.
So science assumes these exist. My God does not assume these things exist. Therefore, God is a better explanation. Is that your argument?
No, what I'm saying is the Bible teaches that these things exist and they come from God.
Okay, so science assumes they exist. The Bible teaches they exist from God. Therefore, God. Is that your argument?
Yes, essentially. I mean,
Okay,
it's more rational than an atheistic position because you can't assume those exist from an atheistic worldview.
That's called an argument from ignorance fallacy. It's literally one of the things we know for a fact does not work.
Yeah. See, here's the.
Hold on. I would also say that we can empirically and scientifically explain why morals exist. We can empirically and scientifically explain why logic exists, because logic is a human description of things that we have perceived in our reality. Morals are also something that we have developed ourselves, and it is an abstract concept that we have developed, not some absolute God figure, which we don't have any evidence that some God figure has developed those morals, especially considering the fact that even within your Bible, your morals have changed.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Hold on. Let me interrupt for just a second, because I feel like this. So, David, you asked specifically for something falsifiable or something that you wanted to know their particular position. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said something to the effect of, if God created the gold brick, we prayed and God created a gold brick. And then, John, you gave 2 or 3 things. So can we deal with those? Because you asked for that and then they gave that. Can we address why those are irrational?
Oh yeah. So
does that sound?
To clarify, he specifically asked what would count as evidence, and my answer is anything that can differentiate imagination from reality is evidence. One of those methods is science, testable predictions. If he can provide any other method that can do that, that would work too. But anything that can differentiate imagination from reality and indicates God would be evidence of a God.
Sure. And what I'm trying to highlight in this is that if you were to say the same thing about something like a unicorn or the flying spaghetti monster, you would say there is no evidence for the flying spaghetti monster unicorns, but you would be able to tell me, based on what you know about this thing, what would constitute evidence. For example, fossils of...
Yeah, Josh gave that example.
Sorry. I don't mean to, because I feel like they were fairly specific in answering that. So like John, and again, correct me if I'm misremembering, but you said things like historical inaccuracies or something in the biblical text. And again, Tom said something about, here's something, a specific thing that's falsifiable. If we prayed and God created a gold brick in front of me and we could repeat that, that would be good evidence. How would you deal with those specific things?
Right. So that what I'm trying to get, I'm trying to find out what he means by God. Is it a personal being? Is it the thing that caused the universe to exist? Is it the thing that's responsible for morals? Is it all of the above? What do you mean when you say God? Something that does whatever you want it to do? Is that how you're defining God?
Well, so we're not the ones defining God here. You guys have the specific definition of God. Like, at the very least, I'm agnostic on, a deistic type of God, a God that just exists outside of this reality, and we will never know that he does or does not exist. We're not the ones with the specific definition of God. You guys have the specific definition of God, which is what our arguments are ultimately stemming from, because those are the definitions that are currently presented.
I have to give a specific definition because I'm taking the strong atheist position. So my position is that all of the above, any definition of God you want to give, if you can't show it's not imaginary, it's imaginary.
Okay, so if I define... Oh, go ahead.
How about Jesus? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So if I define God as a metaphysical thing, it is the thing that caused the universe to exist. Is that evidence for God then, in your opinion?
No,
If I say God is the thing that started the universe, that caused the universe to exist.
no, that's
So
a
Can you
hypothesis.
prove that?
No, so that's
Can
your
you prove it?
you've given a definition.
I'm asking, is it possible? Because you're saying there is no evidence. So if I can show that it's possible that the evidence fits the conclusion through induction that it was God, then the statement that there is no evidence for God is nullified, and you can't make that statement anymore.
No, that's not evidence of a God. So that would be post hoc reasoning. Post hoc reasoning is when you look at a body of evidence and then you make a hypothesis to fit the evidence. That is not evidence. That's literally called post hoc theorization. It is abductive reasoning, which is also known as affirming the consequent fallacy, introduced by logic by Charles L. Pierce. Those literally are not evidence. You can use them as a basis to come up with a hypothesis, perfectly rational. They are not evidence the hypothesis is true. So no, that is not evidence that it is not imaginary. You have not provided a way to differentiate if it's imaginary from reality. All you did is you came up with an imaginary hypothesis.
So we don't exist, is what you're saying.
No, I never said that. Dr. Jeff, did I ever say that we don't exist?
If I say that God could have been the thing that caused our existence, we exist. So if you're saying that God is not the thing that caused the universe to exist, but then we don't exist.
Hold on.
No.
Hold on. Can you prove that God is the thing that causes to
exist? Wait.
What is your evidence?
I can't prove to you that God exists. But what we're talking about right now, whether or not
I think we understand. David, let me see. So you're saying that whatever caused us to exist, you're going to define whatever the thing that caused us to exist as God. Is that what you're saying?
No, I said he'd be a personal mind. So that whatever we know what is true about a mind, which would be similar to
so then what I said was correct. So if you just define whatever created us as God, like if the universe itself was the eternal thing, then that would be God in your definition. Then you're right. That would definitely exist. You can use induction to conclude that whatever created us for sure. And you can just label that as a God. But if you want to attribute other properties to it, like it's a personal being, no, that you would need to provide evidence for. Otherwise, it's just one of infinitely many possible imaginary hypotheses you come up with. And there's no way to differentiate that from just being an imaginary thing in your head.
Right.
So there's no evidence for that.
Okay. You said provide evidence, or are you talking about for your definition of God? What about Jesus Christ of Nazareth?
I think he existed, unlike
GE. He claimed to be God. So hypothetically speaking, if Jesus Christ is God and there's evidence for his existence, then would that be considered evidence for God from your perspective?
I claim to be the king of the Klingon nation under Alpha Centauri. Is that evidence that I'm king of the Klingon nation of Alpha Centauri?
Well, if you divided history, then I would definitely take maybe look into that. I mean,
hold on. Didn't Jim Jones claim to be of God or from God or some
prophet of God? Yeah, right. That's a big difference.
Muhammad,
that's the exact opposite.
Prophet of God?
Muhammad never performed any miracles. That's not a really good example.
Yeah, what I'm saying is Jesus Christ claimed to be God. Now, Jesus Christ made some bold statements, such as when Peter confessed who he is, he said, on this rock I will build my church. And when he talked about the Holy Spirit, he talked about this this intimate relationship that people would have with God afterwards. And he actually says the world cannot see it, but you see it because he dwells within you. Now, so 2,000 years later, we have the existence of the church and these people saying the same things that Jesus Christ did. So is that evidence that Jesus Christ's words are at least true and he could be considered God? Or at least you would be open to it?
So as far as historiography goes, the earliest gospel is Mark. Mark never has Jesus claiming to be God. In fact, when he's brought in front of Pilate.
Actually, that's incorrect.
Hold on. Like, I feel like now we're shifting into is Christianity rational, and I don't think that's where we want to go. That discussion would be to see. I don't think that's the way we want to go. Why don't we try to bring it back to, all right, here, either you guys showing how GE and TJump have irrational claims or beliefs, or you guys showing that your atheism is rational. Why don't we bring it back?
I want to actually point out real quick that I find it interesting that the assumption is that I am saying that you guys are irrational. I would actually say that that is evidence that atheists to some degree are being irrational, because I never said that atheism is irrational. I said it depends on the circumstance, and for some reason, the default cognitive response to what I'm saying somehow ends up being that I'm assuming or asserting that you guys are being irrational. So,
no, David. After you started that, I gave you my reason for being an atheist.
yeah.
And I specifically asked, can you point out the point that I'm being illogical, or the reasons why I'm being illogical, or why my reasoning is flawed? And I have not actually heard an argument against my reason for being an atheist.
Sure. And yeah, I've been responding to TJump. Sorry, let me engage with you. Yeah, sorry.
So what's the title of the debate today?
Is atheism rational? Exactly.
So yeah, by that, then to me, the lack of belief wouldn't require rational thought. So I say it's irrational right off the bat. If it's just a lack of belief.
I think that
this debate wasn't about whether y'all's position was rational or not. It was about is atheism right?
Well, okay, but listen, I didn't just say, oh, I don't believe in a God.
Right.
I gave you a specific step-by-step reasoning for why I don't believe in God. And you guys have really not engaged.
I wouldn't call that a step-by-step reasoning. You said you used to be a Christian or a theist, right, but you never really explained the process that led you to be an atheist. Because obviously you thought there was evidence for God beforehand.
Matt,
right? I mean,
I never considered. No, listen. Okay, if you guys want to know my personal story, I grew up in the deep South, the asshole of the Bible Belt, right? I never questioned whether or not God existed. All right. I was never given that option. I never considered the option of God not existing. Okay. So that was never a thing for me. I grew up knowing, quote unquote, knowing that God existed. I grew up surrounded by people that believed that God existed. And it wasn't until my beliefs were challenged and I carefully considered all of the arguments and all of the quote unquote evidence for God existing that I came to the conclusion that he probably doesn't exist. Okay. And I did give you a step-by-step thing, a very basic layout of why I don't believe in God. And I feel like you guys have not actually engaged with any of that step-by-step reasoning.
Okay, I'm trying to. This is actually my first time doing a 2-on-2 debate. It's actually a lot more difficult than I thought. So I apologize. Again, I have misunderstood Tom a couple of times, and I want to try and engage with you now if I can. So let me see if I think I've come up with an answer to kind of best answer this question. So to the question, is atheism rational? My response as a general rule, okay, is it depends on the person. And only the person knows whether or not the reasons that they have are emotional in nature or rational in nature. And of course, I do think it sounds like if your reason is based on logic, okay, yes, I would say that to that person, their form of atheism is rational, because that's what the definition of rational is. It's based on reason. However, if your reason for not believing in God or maintain, I guess you could say suppressing a belief in God is based on emotional reasons, then the answer is no. Now, I'm not talking about you guys necessarily specifically. We can, but we're talking about the atheism position. So, and this, you can imagine this is probably hard to answer as well, given that you two take different positions on the definition of atheism. Randall Gann gave a different definition. That's kind of part of the problem with some of these debates at times, is that the definition doesn't seem to be too straightforward. So I'm trying to wrestle with what each person means by definition. I have to address each person individually. So my general... Go ahead.
We've took both of the definitions. There's two definitions. One is a lack of belief. One is a rejection. You could just pick either position and say this one is irrational for reason X. And we literally gave both of our justifications for both of those reasons. So you could just, you have a formal argument that I could present to you for either of our positions, and you could just take it apart and say which one of our positions is irrational, which part of this argument does not correlate to reason or logic and show. So we literally gave you both of our positions. We took both of the definitions of atheism, so you could pick either one you wanted to address and say either one is rational, and then gave you our justifications for those reasons. So you have everything you need. You shouldn't have any problem here. Just pick anything you want in anything we presented. Show what is not in accordance with reason or logic in either of our positions in this debate.
I kind of thought that I had already done that. I mean, let me give you an example. 2 weeks ago, I was in a discussion on morality on another show, and we were talking about empathy and apathy, and an atheist was arguing that we've evolved empathy, and that's how we got morals. And I said, well, what about apathy? Obviously, we've evolved apathy, so what makes you decide one over the other? And he said, well, apathy is just the lack of empathy, the non-existence of empathy. A jar would be apathetic. And I'm thinking, okay, well, by that reason and logic, if this atheist is saying a jar could
what does it have to do with
apathetic,
our position? What about our position?
Because this debate wasn't, is Godless Engineer and TJump's atheism rational? It's just, is atheism rational? No, it wasn't.
Right, but
that was not the title that I agreed to.
All right.
Because in order,
hang on. So, Matt, I agree with you, right? I agree with you. I think the problem here is that, David, because you asked for, at least seemingly, it seemed to me anyway, and it seemed like it seemed to them, you were asking for the specifics of their position so that you could determine whether it was rational or irrational. Matt, I think that's what's happened. So if we want to shift it a different way,
if David wants to continue there, go ahead, David. I'll let you have it.
Wait. I want to pick up on that real quick. So this debate is literally me and Godless. I mean, we can't represent other people's position. We can't say, well, Richard Dawkins' position is rational. So this literally, the whole point of the debate is our versions of atheism, which we're trying to represent the global large position of either lack belief or a rejection, the two most common positions. We're trying to represent the biggest portion of atheism in the world. Is our position and our arguments as we presented it rational? That's the point of the debate. Arguing against some straw man of some other people who aren't here.
But if you're arguing the position to represent everybody, then I just provided an example of somebody who would say a jar was an atheist. So you're not really up. Yeah,
he's not here.
Yeah, no, but you just said you were trying to represent everyone, but you're not representing him.
Yes, we're trying to represent the most common positions, both of them, which are either lack belief or rejection of, which we are representing in the steel man position, the strongest form of the argument. We're not going to cherry pick some weak nobody who doesn't know philosophy and say, well, his argument is weak, therefore his atheism is irrational.
I will tell you that that's the majority of the atheists I agree with. That I did. Well, it is with me. I mean, I'm talking about you. I'm not talking about philosophers, because this wasn't a debate about is philosophers of atheism a rational argument. It was, is atheism an argument?
So that's
but go ahead, David. You can continue.
Addressing a weaker form of the argument that no one really adheres to is called a straw man. If you want to address the stronger form of the argument, the most rational position, the philosophers one take, is called a steel man. When you're addressing a position, you want to address the strongest kind, because if the strongest kind beats you, then you lose. So the point here is you need to address our position. We're the ones here in the debate.
No, I don't think you need to address the strongest position. All you need to do is just the atheist position, even the weakest position. Let me before I came on here, I took a poll.
Okay, hold on. If I attacked the weakest Christian position, have I defeated Christianity? Like if I attack Branch Davidians or the People's Temple, Jim Jones,
Kent Hovind,
have I defeated Christianity?
No, because if you attack the Branch Davidian or them, I'd probably say they weren't Christians. So would you say these people were not atheists?
No.
I mean, it's a logical question, I think.
No,
okay. Look, whatever. All right, let's hold on.
Let's get back. Let's let David have the floor.
It's evolving just a little bit.
Yeah.
When I talk, no, I'm just kidding. So look, I feel like we've settled something here, right? We've determined that Matt. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you think that you've shown, or you're arguing that you've shown that this particular type of atheism is irrational. Whatever that is, whether it's true or not, fine. But that's what we've decided here. So, but if we're going to try to deal with broad definitions, maybe of atheism, let's also regroup and try to do that. Given that I think that's probably true, that we would want to, be it Christian or atheism, we'd probably want to stick with what mainstream is, or what consensus is, or what most people. So let's do that.
Yeah, let's stick with the positions like we presented in our opening. Like show what about our positions is irrational. If
Okay,
our position,
I'll let David. David can have the floor since he wanted to kind of deal with y'all's positions individually.
Yeah, let me start. Is it John? Did I hear it right? Is it John?
Godless engineer, yeah.
Okay, let me answer you now. So okay, based on what you said, so it sounds like basically what you said is that the reason why you kind of maybe didn't even possibly even have a true belief in God, but you were just around people. But if you did believe that there was a God at your time, and then you were challenged on your beliefs, and then you said, okay, well, these reasons seem more, I guess you could say, real than the reasons that I believe. If your reason, again, because we're talking about, is atheism rational? So if your definition of atheism is as you have described, based on what you said, I would say that for you, yes, your position is rational, because rationality is based on reason. You said that these are the reasons why you don't believe in God. So based on the definition of rationality and reason, for you, I would say that your definition of atheism is rational. And see, this is kind of why I gave the little disclaimer at the beginning that this is kind of a loaded question in a sense, because the title atheism does not have a set standard of what it means to be an atheist. So you have to deal with each person individually.
So I highly disagree with labeling either myself or TJump as not real Christians to begin with. I mean,
no, I didn't say that.
No, yes, you did. You said that, you're not a sincere Christian.
No, I said you grew up around Christians, but I said whether or not your belief in God was a true belief. But I'm just giving you the benefit of the doubt. I'm saying, okay, you believed in God, okay, supposedly. Say you believed in God, so I'm taking you at your word on that. And you're saying the reason why you stopped believing in God is because of these other reasons that were presented to you, correct?
Okay.
Right? Okay,
yeah.
So based on what the definition of rationality is, which is, I should have pulled up rationality.
With reason or logic.
Thank you. Yes, in accordance with reason or logic, yes, you had reasons. So, like I said, I am not taking a position as a starting point because I already knew this was going to happen. Okay,
but wait, just to clarify, it's not any reason. You can't just say any reason, therefore it's rational. You can have bad reasons which are irrational. So the fact that it's in accordance with a reason doesn't make it rational. It has to be a good reason, a logical reason that.
Right. So if I say, well, my reason for not believing in God is because I hate God for whatever personal reason I have, that would be an irrational reason to not believe in God.
Yes, that's what I was.
I think that I can speak for both TJump and myself is that you should have better reasons not to believe in God than just, I broke my dick one day or something like that. Like, I feel like there should be better reasons to not believe in God than that.
Right. Yeah. And if you don't believe it's real, right, then I think that that's fair. Okay. I don't, you shouldn't believe in something that you don't think is real. Okay. I agree with that. So, yeah. Okay.
So what parts of our position is not in accordance with reason or logic? Either of our positions in this debate, or would you grant that both of our positions are completely rational?
Well, I have a problem with yours, but I think that John's is more rational.
Okay, what's your problem with mine?
So let's deal with TJump's rationality on why God definitely does not exist.
So there's nothing to respond to with Tom. He just says, I don't see, I personally, me and my psychological state of mind, I don't see reasons to, I'm not going to contend with your psychological state of mind. It's a lost cause. I'm not going to argue with you because only you can change your mind. I'm not going to change your mind.
Strawman again. So whether my personal state is irrelevant to the question. The question is, if my personal state accurately represents the fact of the matter of the evidence, if there is no objectively good evidence, then my personal psychological state is correct and it's in accordance with reason or logic. So unless you can present an actual good reason which can differentiate imagination from reality, then my position is rational. Saying that, well, my position is only a description of my psychological state is not a reason it's not rational, so that is a straw man, irrelevant red herring. So again, you need to provide a reason why what I stated is not in accordance with reason or logic, or by definition, it is rational.
Okay, you said an objective. So who gets to define what's objective?
I don't care. Give me a way to differentiate. No. That's irrelevant. Again, it's irrelevant. You need to provide any method you want that can differentiate imagination from reality. Who gets to decide isn't relevant to the question.
I said, if God exists, is it possible that he created the universe? That would be an argument that would show that there are reasons to believe that God exists. And you said, no, I don't accept that.
No. Again, remember, my criterion is you need to provide a way that can differentiate imagination from reality. Is it possible that green pixie unicorns created the universe? Yes. Does that differentiate imagination from reality? No. Is that evidence? No.
Are you saying green pixie unicorns have the same standard of evidence to me as God?
The one you just presented, yes, because the evidence you presented was, well, it's possible God created the universe, and it's possible green pixie leprechauns created the universe. So the possibility of something being able to create the universe cannot differentiate imagination from reality. Therefore, it is not evidence.
What's a green pixie?
So also, I want to caution against the fallacy of possible, therefore probable. Just because it's possible that Bigfoot could exist does not mean that it's probable that Bigfoot could exist. In the same way that, in this whole discussion of whether or not God exists, possible does not mean that it's probable. And I think that's where it lies the irrationality of a belief in God on that particular reason, is that, just because it's possible that God exists does not mean that it's probable that God exists.
Right, but the possibility is what you have to. If I can't even get you to accept a possibility, well, then
I agreed to the
never
possibility. I agreed to the possibility.
We both agree that it's both possible.
So in my argument, I literally said it's possible green pixie unicorns created the universe. So I'm granting the possibility that God did too here. I'm saying the possibility cannot differentiate whether or not this hypothesis you have presented is real or imaginary, because I can present an imaginary thing that can do the same possibility.
Right, and Matt kind of touched on it, at least with our God. This is supposed to be more of a general conversation with deity, not necessarily the Christian God. But Matt gave an example of what would constitute that. Now, if I were to ask you, okay, so you start somewhere, right? So you say, okay, it's possible God created. Okay, so is it then possible that Jesus was God? So we have more evidence. If that's true, I'm just saying if that's true.
Possibility isn't evidence. Possibility is a hypothetical. Hypotheticals are not evidence. You need evidence. It's hypothesis.
It's possible that a pink elephant exists. That doesn't mean that pink elephants exist.
Evidence of pink elephants.
What I'm saying is that if I can't even get you to accept it as a possibility, I can't further.
We already granted the possibility.
Hang on, David. Could you do me a favor, just because I feel like this will help? Could you sort of steel man Tom's position just very briefly? Because I think this is where it's sort of getting mixed up. Like what I hear you saying is
with atheism or with his criteria of evidence.
Either one, I think, would be fine, but probably more for the evidence. But yeah, Tom, which would be better for you? Do you think?
Evidence.
Okay.
Evidence. Okay. Yeah. Steelman. So what it sounds to me like you're saying is that. I mean, you, like you said, you don't see if there's any good reason to believe in God, and that what you're saying is that you need some kind of verifiable standard of evidence that shows that what I'm saying is true, right?
No, I never said verifiable. What were my literal words? What did I literally say was my standard of evidence?
Can you repeat it? Because
a golden brick. Didn't you say a golden brick?
No. Oh my God. So. Literally, I've said this like 1,000 times. My standard of evidence.
You talk so fast that sometimes I'm trying to remember everything that you said. Okay, so.
Regardless, what is my standard of evidence?
All right. Well, why don't we just we can move this along, Tom? Go ahead and tell him what it is. Again.
I got this. What is it?
I don't think he knows.
No. I mean, I'm about 3 drinks in. So
sorry. The point.
Sure. My standard evidence is you need any method that can differentiate imagination from reality. That is the standard evidence. Anything that can do that is evidence.
And one of them was
that multiple times.
Praying and receiving a golden brick or something.
Yeah, that was a hypothetical I made up on the fly. That doesn't matter to the example. There's infinite many ways to do this.
So that wouldn't be something you would require.
That's one of the possibilities. That is a possibility.
Okay.
That would count.
Right. So basically, how do you guys determine imagination or fictional things from reality?
I mean, that which purports to reality.
Great.
I mean, honestly, at this point, I don't feel like it's even worth talking about my personal beliefs, because I already know you're not going to accept anything that I have to say. So
Well, yeah,
It's not about our
I mean,
acceptance.
we're not asking about your personal beliefs. We're asking about what is your method. Like, let's just say one day, and there are plenty of YouTubers out there that you can actually look up and see this. Let's say one day you get this dream, right? And you come away thinking that it's from God. How do you determine between a message from God or anything else that exists in reality from just your pure imagination or just your own mind making it up? How do you determine between those two things?
I mean, I don't have dreams from God, I would say. So I wouldn't, I mean, I don't really know how I would even go about going about that. I mean,
I could answer something from a purely scientific perspective as far as faults are concerned. As far as what we've been taught by science and philosophers and people like Sam Harris, that we can't control our own thoughts, that it comes from upstream, our previous experiences, life experiences from previous generations that kind of flow down towards us. Is kind of what Sam Harris has argued. Now, when I was growing up, I never remember a time where I didn't have this concept of a higher power, a creator, so to speak, or a God. And then when I got, older, I was raised in a Christian household, but I don't remember my parents actually saying, hey, this was God, this was God, a lot of this stuff kind of come natural. In fact, there was a specific example. I remember I was laying in my brother's room in the mid-afternoon one time, and some light was shining through, and I could see the particles of dust as it was just floating around in the air. And for some odd reason, I thought, why am I me? Why am I Matthew Adams right here, right now? That was a thought I had at about 8 or 9 years old. Now the question is, why did I think that? What put that thought into my mind? Why did I have these thoughts on God? Now, according to Sam Harris, we can't control our own thoughts. So if we can't control our own thoughts, then who's feeding us these thoughts on God? And to me, that would be actual evidence that God exists.
Okay. Let me play off that a little bit. How do you know that's not just your own mind making up things? How do you know that that's God that's interacting?
Well, as far as being able to know for sure, I wouldn't have known for sure at the time. But my point is, if we're having these thoughts that we can't control, then why would our mind be making up thoughts about God, something that doesn't exist, that we can't even control, but yet we're thinking about it?
I mean, you realize that Bigfoot romantic erotica exists. I feel like that in and of itself proves that
I don't think I ever pondered on the existence of Bigfoot like I pondered on the existence of God, even as a young child.
Yeah, but other people did. Lots of other people did.
Lots of other people did, to the point where they
if you go by the Oxford study in 2014, people actually kind of naturally ponder God. So
okay. Well, then how do you explain the existence of cults like Heaven's Gates cult that felt like there was a spaceship behind Haley, the Hale-Bopp comet that was prepared to take them to heaven, into another plane of existence? How do you explain that and the other cult beliefs that exist out there, where people are representatives of God or are sons of God or something of that nature? It kind of seems like if that were
basically, why is there all these myths and all the other stuff? Is that what you're saying?
You brought up the example of why do our brains cause us to have this false idea of a god, and he's saying, well, our brains cause us to have lots of silly, stupid beliefs. Here's a lot of examples of them in the world, like Bigfoot and UFOs and other cults. It's pretty obvious that we can conclude that there's
Well,
other.
how do we know that these thoughts don't have some element of truth to them?
That's what he's asking you.
Well, what I'm saying is Scripture as a Christian. And I'm assuming y'all studied Scripture if you've used to be Christians. I know Tom said he used to be a Christian. But as a Christian, it says God has put eternity in man's heart, yet man has not understood it. But yet man, according to Scripture, naturally seeks after these things that he doesn't understand. So to me, it's logical to conclude that man, if they didn't fully understand things, would start making things up in order to try to fill in the gaps, as y'all would say. Sure. Now, so I'm actually supporting y'all's argument here. Now, here's the problem with the fill in the gap argument that is often made. I think it totally annihilates atheism. It actually makes atheism completely irrational. Because if in the early history of man did not understand these scientific, didn't have these scientific knowledge that he has now, but yet he naturally attributed things to God, but yet he cannot control his own thoughts, then that is evidence that someone is feeding him these thoughts so that he can basically have a relationship with this being. And it shows that man was wired to have a relationship with God.
Okay. So using that conclusion there, somebody that naturally comes to the conclusion that UFOs and extraterrestrials have plundered their booty, does that mean that extraterrestrials have actually plundered their booty?
Well, extraterrestrials wouldn't imply that they were gods.
It doesn't have to be that, because
you're not understanding what I'm saying here.
No, I am. Look,
I don't think you are. Because if we can't control our own thoughts, then why does theism exist?
Because of evolution.
To me, that's a simple question.
It's because of evolution. But I want to before we end, I want to address
but that means evolution is teaching a lie. And so you can't control your own cognitive abilities at that point.
I already addressed that earlier.
Well, you did.
Evolution cannot
give
us all. Wait. No, I already did. Evolution cannot give us all false beliefs. Evolution cannot cause us to imagine a square circle or that we don't exist and be wrong or be right. There's lots of things.
Yeah, but see, you're making an objective claim there with laws of logic. Matt, is logic objective?
Matt, stop. Yes, logic is describes reality.
Okay.
That logic, we made up logic to describe reality. Reality existed first. Logic is a language to describe.
Wait, we made it up?
Yes, we made it up. Reality is reality.
So logic wouldn't exist without humans.
No, logic is a language like English. But again, I want to go back to some things. So David keeps saying this really silly argument that I wanted to address before we end, which is that, well, you won't accept it, therefore I won't present arguments. That is a really silly thing to say. Like, the topic of the debate is atheism rational? If I'm debating a flat earther and the topic is flat earth rational, I'm not going to not present an argument because the flat earther might not accept it. Who cares if the flat earther is not going to accept it? The point is to show his position is irrational because he doesn't accept it. So if he doesn't accept it, that makes me win. So the whole point is all he has to do is present one good argument or evidence that is rationally leads to the conclusion of a God, would then prove I'm irrational regardless of whether or not I accept it. Because it's not about whether or not I accept it. That's not relevant to the debate. So his objection that, well, I won't accept it is just a deflection tactic theists use to prevent showing their arguments that we can debunk how bad they are. It's just an evasion tactic that's irrelevant to the debate.
Or I could just tell you that I'm not convinced that you'll believe it. So until you can convince me that you're going to believe it, then I'm not obligated to provide you a response.
Then atheism is rational if I'm on the debate. Okay.
No, because you have to give me a reason.
Yeah, there's no.
You have to argue your position.
I literally did that in the opening. So if there's no rational reasons to believe in a God, it's rational to conclude it's imaginary. And you presided none of them, so it's rational to conclude it's imaginary. And I'm rational of atheism.
Right, and I would say, David, you asserted that I'm actually rational in my atheism. So I think that by default, TJump would also be rational in his atheism if you can't demonstrate how he's irrational in his atheism.
But now, see, we started this conversation off saying, no, we all have to define atheism for ourselves. Now you're trying to lump TJump into your atheism.
Oh, no.
Define it the same way as you do.
What he's saying is that his reason for his atheism is the same as my reason for my atheism. And so they're both just, if his reason works and so does mine, they're both justifications.
So your reason is a lack of reason.
Yeah, my reason for believing God is imaginary is because there's no evidence that it's not imaginary. Therefore, it's reasonable to conclude it's imaginary.
Okay, so according to what? Yeah, go ahead, John. John.
Sorry, no, it's just
I think it's time, ain't it?
Yeah, it's time.
Your response, put it in the comments, however you want to do it. Let's see what you got.
Let's see what you got. Let's see what you got.
Let's see.
All right. All right, Jeff. What you think, man? What you think?
I don't think we addressed the question, or I have not seen any argument to lead me to believe that atheism is irrational.
Agreed. The topic of the night is atheism,
and I think we can go back to the Mike Bringardi debate with Eddie, where we clearly gave the win to Eddie because Mike was not prepared to debate that specific topic, which is what we were asking about that day. I mean, in this case, I think it's the opposite as far as the sides that are given the better argument here. And that's TJump's asking for a couple simple things. One, a method in which to demonstrate or differentiate between the imaginary and the reality. That's a pretty clear thing. And an example or why his reasoning that he outlined at the beginning is irrational, which I did not see any of that, so that's why. And then I don't know, we're still in limbo here. I didn't get a solid answer.
Nope. That's where I'm at. I came into it as, can someone show me that my position of being atheist is irrational? I did not hear that. I was not convinced that it is irrational. So after our last two debates at TART Live debate night, we gave to the theist. This one I'm going to give to the atheist. I was not convinced by the argument, but we're going to go to Q&A.
Entertaining debate.
Oh yeah, it was a great debate. And TJump and GE, Matt and David, thank you for doing it. It was an awesome debate.
And Dr. Thank you for reffing.
Yeah, he did great. Absolutely. But Jeff, have you? I ask people this all the time. Have you ever seen inside of a murder shed before?
I don't think anybody's seen the inside of a murder shed and made it out alive.
Well, I'd say that was darn near a Donnybrook. I thought I was going to lose an eye. So I had a friend that I used to go to the conventions with. Well, we won't talk too much about the conventions. But in any case, he got sentenced to death by electric chair. And a priest came up and said, do you have any last wishes? And he said, yes. Could you please hold my hand? Now, needless to say, the priest was very shocked. How's it going, everybody? Hey, TJump.
We're going. Oh, and I wanted to critique Just Jeff. I mean, there are pictures of me having invaded the murder shed and gotten out alive. Just to put that out.
No, those aren't real. Those are figments of my imagination. Prove me wrong.
Fair point.
It's okay. I'm gonna bring you Jeff's leg, or I'm gonna bring you Murder Shed Steve's leg one of these days, and that'll be the proof.
I mean, we'll be meeting up here in a few weeks, so
yep.
You're coming to my territory in my state,
where all his guns are. Yeah. So I've got plenty of questions to field here. First of all, we have one that unfortunately we lost because it got too far up there. I know. But
did it get murdered?
I happen to be able to read the ghosts of questions. Questions have spirits, and that I can demonstrate that right here. Roderick, is Godless Engineer a real engineer?
Yes, I am a real engineer. I have a master's in software engineering and a bachelor's in computer engineering. So, I mean, I'm twice an engineer.
So, but you're not driving trains.
Wait, don't those just cancel each other
No.
out?
No, they don't. They don't really.
You divide it off, and no engineer.
Software engineer is just kind of an extension of a portion of computer engineer, because computer engineering is both hardware and software, whereas software engineering is just purely software. So it's just it's kind of complementary in that way.
I got another one from Johan Roderick, another super chat question for you again, GE. How large is a whale's ...
Yeah, I think you're a pervert there, GE. I'm here to answer that question. I'm here to help.
A whale's penis is 15 foot long, according to Kent Hovind, but in reality, they're only 10 feet long. But the meme is 15 feet.
Now, have you experienced this yourself?
I have not experienced that myself. I'm only going off of what the scientific evidence says.
Fair enough. Well, consensus is a good thing. Question for all: is atheism rational? Waiting on an answer.
No.
Fair enough. Thanks for the answer. Man.
Best argument presented all night.
Appreciate that.
Well, so what I take away from this discussion tonight is that my position, the non-theist position, or the not believing in God position, is very rational, but the jury is still out on the hard atheism. The God definitely doesn't exist. That is kind of what I take away from this, but maybe I'm wrong.
I sit in the same position, but I feel like that's just because I need to discuss this a little bit more with TJump. Maybe we'll find out. Randolph Richardson has a question. Richardson, for David, how is your statement authoritative that there is no standard definition of atheism, when your partner Matt admitted atheists often tell him atheism is absence of belief?
So, absence of belief. So let me make sure I'm getting the question. How is your statement third?
Yeah, usually they tell me it's a lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. It's usually the general definition I get.
Right. That's the that's kind of that's like the straight definition. That's part of the reason why I quoted part of the Stanford Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy, because that's what the experts are more using. In fact, from what I understand, they look down upon the lack belief definition. In other words, people who don't make up their mind about whether they disbelieve or don't know about God, because the lack belief fits more into the category of agnosticism. So
actually, can I pick up on that real quick? That's actually false. So Oxford Dictionary Philosophy 2008, Simon Blackburn, University Press, ISBN 9780199541430. Either the lack of belief that that exists a God, or the belief that there exists none, sometimes thought of itself to be more dogmatic than mere agnosticism. So either one, Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy works. So you're cherry picking. So
it works.
Right.
I'm saying it's intended, but yeah. Okay.
Well, I would say that there's two different views of atheism, because you've got either agnostic or gnostic, and so agnostic would be more of the non-belief, and then gnostic would be more of the positive belief. So they're both atheism, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Did I answer the question? I just want to make sure I answered the question here.
As well as you answered the question whether or not atheism was rational. Johan Roderick had another question. Oh. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
It is the only
Yes.
true Christmas movie.
Yes.
And it is the
number two
definitive Christmas movie.
Both 1 and 2 are Christmas movies.
I believe that it actually originates from Yule time. They were watching Die Hard while they were drinking eggnog and dancing around a fire naked.
With trees.
That makes sense.
That's where it all comes from.
That.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's actually a Yule time tradition to watch Die Hard.
The Vikings did it.
Giant baby bashments.
I got a question, another super chat question from Atheist Cats. Is it rational to believe just because there is a possibility it is that rational?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to get at. A belief, by definition, is something that is accepted as true, and it has reasons. And this is actually usually where it ends up being a misconception on the atheist part, that you need to prove that something is true before you have a good reason to believe in it. So you can believe in something if you have a reason to believe in it, and that, by definition, is a justifiable belief. And again, what they were saying is that whether it's true or not, whether it's proven as true, is a different question. Right, but that's kind of what I was trying to get at with, if you try to throw flying spaghetti as an equal, and I know that you, John, have just recently had some encounters with Trinity Radio using the Hunter's dilemma to kind of illustrate this point. If you're going to say that God is just as rational as a belief as green spaghetti or whatever the case may be, you need to make you need to make the distinction between what you're talking about and what I'm talking about, and why there's just as much evidence for this thing that I'm saying is the cause versus what you're talking about.
What?
So,
Okay. Well, there's no evidence for a God existing, and there's no evidence that. I mean, you use green spaghetti, but I guess I'm going to go with the flying spaghetti monster or God or anything of that nature. Like, it's on the same footing because neither of them have supporting evidence. I mean, I get that you think that there's supporting evidence, but as far as I'm concerned, none of that actually supports your position.
Well,
So-
I think David was conceding that you can have false beliefs, and one person's standards of evidence might be different than another's. So
No.
you can.
Yeah,
have-
but that's
you can have
where we get
beliefs.
into trouble with the thought process and getting people into believing cats are evil and we're going to kill all of them, or that the COVID vaccine contains fucking the mark of the beast or whatever.
Or
You
that we
gotta
should
have
kill
a way
all
to-
left-handed people.
Yeah, you have to have a way to ground your belief in something to prove that it's not imaginary. And that's what I'm saying. Just because someone believes that I'm God, or someone believes that this God is this or whatever, just because they believe it, that does not merit any value to the belief. There has to be some way to differentiate made up shit from real shit. Like that's.
I do want to clarify,
Unless
'cause-
if you're using value subjectively.
well, I do want to
'Cause it could
clarify
be
because
subjectively.
David said a reason. If you have a reason, it's rational, and that's false. Like, no, it needs to be a good reason. Like,
Good reason.
I could say I believe in the spaghetti monster because it makes me feel good. That's a reason. It's not a rational reason. I'm not rational to believe that. And the problem is theism has no good reasons. It's all the reasons are just made up emotional stuff that can't, as Jeff said, differentiate between imagination and reality. So there are no reasons to believe in a God.
Wouldn't that be just a
made up.
subjective viewpoint at that point?
No.
I feel good about
TJump said so.
monster.
Apparently.
Because that would, again, let's say that someone says that they think that the COVID vaccine has the mark of the beast in it. Is that a good reason to believe that? What would you require from someone in order to believe that? You have some standards that you would outline for that, and none of those standards, when applied to your belief of Christianity, pass the test.
Right.
Well, what I'm saying is some people would disagree with that.
Well, of course, people disagree with everything, but what
I
the
mean,
point is,
like earlier when I
when
brought
you
up
take your level of
the-
skepticism that you have right now and just apply that to your own belief system, it fails.
People
No, that's-
disagree that the earth
I
is
have
round. It
I
doesn't
have
mean
done
you're
that.
right.
That's why I'm a Christian. I've been debating atheists for 7 years. I've heard about every argument they could make, and I'm just not. I'm not convinced of their position that they have logical reason.
There isn't a position to take. You are a Christian. That's
Yes.
your position. And what he's saying is it's irrational because you can't differentiate between real things and imaginary things. Or
But
give
how
us the
does he
method
know
to do
that?
Well, it's
So-
like what
I mean,
Murder
that
Shed
would
Steve
be a
said.
subjective opinion.
No. It's like what Murder Shed Steve said. There are people who think the world is flat. Is that a subjective opinion? Do they get to say, well, science is just a subjective opinion? No, they're objectively wrong. So there is a subjective measure, and you guys are wrong. That's the point.
They could say what aligns with my reality shows that the Earth is flat, and
that's
you could.
subjective.
They might not be wrong, right? I mean,
No.
unless they've went further.
No, they're
I-
objectively wrong. They are objectively wrong.
Yeah.
So-
in the shared reality, they're wrong. I
Yeah,
have
but
another
what
question
I'm-
from Atheist
Go ahead.
Cats. Sorry, we do have to move it
Godless, you all right?
Okay.
No early civilization believed in a god. They believed in natural spirits. Were they rational?
Well, I don't necessarily think that I would agree with that, because kind of the beliefs in the supernatural and the beliefs in God have, as early as we have writings, we have evidence that people believed in the supernatural. Now, whether or not what specific gods they believed in, we don't know. But yeah, I think beliefs in God are rational, simply because obviously I'm coming from a belief that God exists, but I believe that atheists have to explain why theism exists in the first place if we can't control our own thought process.
Is believing in spirits
no.
rational? Back then, that's what he asked. The question was, are the people in the past, is their belief in spirits rational?
Yes, I think so. I believe in spirits now. So, and I consider that rational.
So let me ask you this. Is somebody who believes in like paganism, are they rational?
Well, I would have to find out why they believe in paganism, but I think paganism is actually a response to the existence of God. From a biblical narrative, it shows that God created man in his own image and likeness. Man rebelled against God, and then man tried to make idols and stuff in their own likeness and image. So
No. But paganism existed before Christianity or Judaism. So
I would disagree with
If I
disagree with
could,
that.
if-
I mean,
if I could.
how do you disagree with that?
Oh, hold on.
Yeah.
Listen. Even in the Bible, you have paganism existing before a belief in the Judaism.
no, you don't.
in
No,
Yahweh.
you don't. Genesis
Okay.
chapter 1.
No. All right,
Genesis chapter 1.
guys, hold on one second. I want to hear what Dr. Joss has to say about this. He has the authority and a history right now.
Well, I mean, I don't know that that's true, but as I understood the question, they were saying, so they believed that the sun, was a deity, right? Utu, or that the storm was a deity, or that the river was a deity, right? And these are all separate deities. To believe the sun to be a deity, is that rational? Am I getting that question right? Do you
No,
think?
I don't think it would be rational myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. I got a question from Atheist Chico, another super chatter. GE, what criteria do you need to join a lesser known channel for discussion? Where can I contact you if interested? I suppose we can.
That's really easy. I'm pretty open to any channel. I don't really have a requirement for how many subscribers or followers or anything like that. You just message me at john@godlessengineering.com. I believe KC actually put that in the chat, if I remember seeing that somewhere. But John, JOHN @godlessengineering.com. And we'll definitely be able to set something up, as long as you're not like some kind of crazy, like, insurrectionist. It'll be fine.
I'm sure that you'll have a good time with Atheist Chico. He's a good dude. Well, there were plenty of other questions that we just couldn't get to, unfortunately. But that's all the questions. Yeah, that's all the questions that I have for today, unless if Oz has another one for me. From the Murder Shed. Thanks for stopping by the Murder Shed, where answers get questioned.
All right.
Think you're better than me?
Yes, look at that green screen. I'm in the ring.
There we go. That's better. Well, my room is very rapidly coming together, and it is going to blow every other streamer's room out of the water.
Awesome. I'm glad you shared that right now.
I just wanted to know, because you're talking about your background. Green screen.
All right. Well, everybody that participated
Participated.
tonight,
Thank you.
hang out for a minute. backstage just so we can chat for a second. But we'll wrap this thing up. Everybody's been in the chats tonight. Thank you very much. There was too many to go through, like we always try to do. Thank you for the super chats. Much appreciated. And we are the Atheist Roundtable. It's been TART Live Debate Night. And just know that we're going live the next 3 nights and got a ton of great content coming to you. But just Jeff, thanks. Everybody that was part of the debate. Thank you. Pasta Mike, thank you. We're out.